The life and legacy of late anti-apartheid activist and photographer Dr. Peter Magubane will be celebrated in a memorial service to be held at the Regina Mundi Catholic Church in Soweto, Johannesburg later today. Magubane died on New Year's Day at the age of 91. SABC News senior reporter Chriselda is in Soweto and she joins us live. A very good afternoon, Chriselda. Of course, you are there ahead of proceedings getting underway. What's the atmosphere like there?
Well, that's right. In the next hour, we're expecting mourners to arrive here at the Regina Mundi Church in Soweto to pay tribute, of course, to the late world-renowned photographer, lensman, as well as anti-apartheid activist, Dr. Peter Magubane. That's scheduled to start at 2 o'clock this afternoon. And, just to borrow from what we've heard over the past couple of days, in particular, reference to an article which I read by veteran journalist Matata Tseru, in which he described Dr. Peter Magubane as, a freedom fighter with a camera, a guerrilla with a camera. This is a man who used his camera to basically expose the atrocities of the apartheid government at a time where these atrocities were being meted out against black people in South Africa during those very, very dark times. He basically used his camera to capture some of South Africa's most defining moments, including the Rivonia trial, the 1976 student uprisings, the Sharpeville massacre as well. Those are just some of the works that he captured while using his camera. And, this was, of course, at great expense, to himself, to his family as well. If I could just make some reference, to some of what he had to endure as a lensman during a very difficult time in South Africa, exposing these atrocities that were being meted out by the apartheid government towards black people in South Africa, in which, if I refer to perhaps like the 1960s, in the 1960s, so you would recall, that was the time when Dr. Peter Magubane was capturing a demonstration that was taking place outside the cell of the late Mamu Winnie Madikizela Mandela. And he had subsequently then been arrested and detained and placed in solitary confinement for more than 500 days. That's just an example of what he had to endure as a lensman during that time. Recall, of course, photographs at the time is what would be beamed for everyone to get a sense, not only in South Africa, but well beyond this country's borders, of what was taking place in the country at the time. So in the next hour, we're expecting mourners to arrive here to pay tribute to Dr. Peter Magubane, and we're going to hear a lot of that sentiment. I mean, myself as a journalist as well, greatly inspired by his work and what he managed to do during such a difficult time. I often wonder what it was like to have been a journalist during that time, having to go head to head with apartheid police who spared absolutely no one, including journalists who were trying to do their jobs and to beam exactly what was taking place at the time. But, much inspiration is drawn from people like Dr. Peter Magubane, and one of those people who was greatly inspired by Dr. Peter Magubane is Sipiwe Sibeko, who is a very respected, lensman, photographer here in South Africa as well. But Speech, thank you very much for joining us, this afternoon. And I think what a loss. When you walked in, I saw you carrying your camera there, and this is such signature in that this is someone who inspired you. His work inspired you to do the great work that you're doing here today. Quite a loss, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks, Chriselda. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come and speak of Ubaba Magubane. He's one man who shed light through his camera the difficulties that black people in South Africa lived under during the times of apartheid. He's someone who was very dedicated to his work, and he was like a father figure to most of us, my generation and the generation before me. He took his work very seriously. When I'm saying he was like a father figure, there were times when we're talking of some general issues in the country. He was a very nice, humble man. He shared a lot of jokes. But when it came to his work, he'll be like an artist who, when performing on stage, is a totally different person to the one you spoke to a few minutes ago. So he was very passionate about his work.
And the generation that came after him, yourselves, he was very passionate, I understand, about ensuring that you owned your work as the generation that came after him. I know, in conversation with you a little bit earlier on, you were the only photographer that had captured the wedding of Dr. Nelson Mandela and Graça Machel. Am I correct?
Yes.
You were the only journalist. And talk to us a bit about that and the relationship that you as the next generation had with him, in him wanting you to own your work, to own the space in which you were operating in.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, Magubane is a father figure and as a mentor to most of us and myself included. I'll go to him before a major assignment and I'll get lots of tips on how to approach the subject and what to do. But most importantly, when it comes to covering the wedding of the late Nelson Mandela, he was not excited about that. What he was more concerned about was me owning the copyright to that work. He always reminded me to make it a point that I get hold of those negatives. They mustn't belong to the company that I work for. So he was that's how passionate he was when it came to our work. So he encouraged us a lot. That's why even most of his books, he owned the copyright to that work. And it's a thorny issue because most photographers are struggling with that nowadays. I hope there will be a way that can be solved really, but it's very, very important.
How do you then carry this baton going forward? I work with you quite a lot on the field. And yes, it was a very different time then, but I guess there are other things, that as journalists and as, photographers, we work hand in hand together on the field. How do you carry that baton? There's an article that was penned by veteran journalist Matata Tsedu, and he spoke about, the last batch of, what did he say? He said it was a freedom fighter with a camera. How do you use your camera to ensure that you tell South Africa's story to make people like him proud?
One of the things that Magubane always instilled in us was to approach our work with respect, but at the same time must be very aggressive. No one should stop us in telling the story stating the story of how people are going through, and then on their daily lives. So it will be one of those things that you just cover. We're the eyes and ears of the community, and not only the community of South Africa, but the world all over. So we still need to report on what's happening, both the good and the bad, but we are the eyes and ears of the community.
And you continue to do fantastic work. I'm always incredibly in awe of your work. And in fact, I understand that your photograph of Dr. Magubane is actually being used for this memorial service, as well as, the funeral, which is true testimony, Mr. Sibeko, to the great work that you are also doing. Many of us incredibly proud of you. Thank you very much for sharing your moments with us and how you were greatly inspired by Dr. Peter Magubane. Thank you very much. Simpiwe Sibeko, who is, of course, a very well-respected photographer here in South Africa, one of those inspired greatly by Dr. Peter Magubane, and, always advising those who came after him, to take their work very seriously. He was concerned about photographers owning, the rights to the work that they have. You've heard from him there, indicating that, he was the only lensman who was at the wedding of the late elder statesman Nelson Mandela and Graça Machel, and he encouraged him to own his work and continue to do fantastic work, certainly. So they continue to carry the baton. We're expecting, of course, that memorial service to get underway at 2 o'clock this afternoon. And I think the sentiments that have been shared by Mr. Sibeko are certainly sentiments that will be resonated inside this church here. A church on its own, which has very rich significance, given that this memorial service of this man who used his camera to expose the atrocities of the apartheid government, this is also a church that shielded many activists during the time. This is the place that they ran to when police would sometimes even barge into this particular church, trying to find those who were so-called trying to stifle or cause some trouble or hindrance towards what the apartheid government was doing at the time, meting out those atrocities against black people. So 2 o'clock this afternoon, and I understand that veteran journalist Matata Tsedu will be one of those that will be leading the program here today. Also, I understand, I think the Deputy Minister of Arts and Culture is also expected to be here. I've not seen that. That's part of what is on the program at this particular stage, but we'll bring all of that live to you. The memorial service of world-renowned photographer as well as anti-apartheid activist Dr. Peter Magubane. Stay here on the SABC News Channel. We'll bring you all of that live.
Thanks very much, my colleague there, Chriselda Lewis.